Hi guys, and welcome back to At Home with Elisa. Today I am down in our cutting garden. It's such a beautiful day. We're still having quite cool nights of a night time, but during the day the weather is absolutely beautiful. I was actually thinking maybe this jumper might be a little bit too hot, but it's just glorious outside. And I am planting some roses. So today I am adding 2 roses to our garden. We do have quite colourful roses. I do like sort of nice pastels, but however when it comes to roses they can be whatever colour they want to be as long as they're beautiful. So these are 2 that I've actually hunted for quite a while. I've had both of them at our last property, however when we moved here they didn't like the conditions. It was a bit wild and extreme here for a while, so they haven't liked the conditions and we've actually just replaced them. So the 2 roses that I'm talking about is one is called a Freesia rose, which is a beautiful yellow rose. I have always loved yellow roses. When I was little, my mum used to own a florist shop, and for all my birthdays I used to get a big basket of yellow roses. So, and it's the same sort of colour yellow rose, so I'm very keen to get that back into the garden again. The colour is just gorgeous. Like I love yellow in the garden. I just love yellow, so I'm very happy that I've managed to track one of those down. It did take a little bit of hunting. And the other rose that I am actually going to be planting is called an Ebb Tide rose. When I first met my husband, he was a widower with 2 little children, and he has a beautiful purple rose tattooed over his heart for his first wife, Megan. And it's a beautiful purple rose. And I remember when I saw it thinking, oh wow, that looks like an Ebb Tide rose. And since then we've actually planted an Ebb Tide in our old house. And as I said, we did transfer it over to this house, however it just didn't take. So I was very lucky that a lovely family member was able to track down an Ebb Tide, because I have been looking and they're very hard to find. So she was able to track down an Ebb Tide for me. I actually got 2, but I'm just planting one today, and I will be planting that into our rose garden. So generally when it comes to the roses, I generally just tend to cut off the blooms. A lot of the roses that we have here, we did bring some with us, but they didn't all survive. So a lot of them are quite immature, so you don't want to cut too much of the stem off. However, today I'm looking at, I just usually just dehead them. But today I'm actually looking at pruning off some. I've got some dead growth that hasn't come back and some disease, and July is actually the perfect time to spray lime sulphur on your roses if you live in New South Wales, in order to try and combat some of those diseases that you usually have later in the season, like black spot. I actually got that tip off a fantastic rose grower, and I chewed his ear off, and I really got a lot of tips on roses. So that's something that we usually do in July. I am a little bit late because we did have some crazy weather in July, so I'm doing it in August this year, and the roses are starting to wake up. I don't know if I've left my run too late, but I'd still rather give it a go anyway, because I really don't want black spot coming and ruining my rose garden. I know I'll still have a little bit of it, but it really does help. Yesterday it was just declared that we are on a La Nina alert level. Before we were on like a watch and see, now we're on alert level, which basically means that a La Nina, our 3rd La Nina event, is inevitable, and it will happen sometime in spring. So I know that sort of humid weather will come through again, and I want to see if I can try and combat that by taking care of my roses now, and hopefully I don't lose any this year. So let's just have a look at the rose garden. It's what I call the disaster garden. As I said, it was one that we actually lost during flooding. Thankfully the roses have managed to pull through. I did lose all the other plants that were planted there, but the roses have managed to pull through. However, I haven't fixed the garden bed because we still have yet to complete our flood remediation work. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that on Saturday, and that will then prevent any further flooding in the rose garden. I can fix it up and mulch it and have it looking really nice again. So this here is my rose garden. It's quite a long garden. I also have bearded iris planted in it, and as you can see, it is looking an awful mess. So I have some blue metal coming to finish off my pathway, but it doesn't really translate on the video, but there's quite big divots just here where the water's just literally run straight through here, and it's really dug out some trenches. I did have some trenches in the garden dug actually to try and let the water through and out the other side of the garden bed. However, they've actually filled in. There's one that's still here, So that was a trench that I actually dug myself to try and let the water, you can see it's carved its way through over here, and it goes down just over this fence line just here. All the water feeds down that way and goes down to a local creek. So that's where we want it to go, but it's just that it causes so much damage in the meantime. There was another trench just here, as you can see that's filled in. And there was another one just here, and as you can see that's also filled in as well. And even though it's not part of the rose garden, this here was where I planted 70 ranunculus plants, and I've had 6 pop up. The rest of them I actually picked them up. Would you believe it? I actually picked them up on this pathway. That's how strong the water was flowing through here. So some of the roses that have been with us for quite a while, this one here is called a children's rose, which is a beautiful pale pink flower. As you can see, it's got some disease on the stems, and I want to just spray that with the lime sulfur. And I don't really have any that I want to cut off because they're all looking quite good, except for that, you can see that brown one just there. So I'll cut that one off, but the rest of them are still looking quite good. They still come back, which is amazing compared to, like, considering what they've actually been through. It's amazing. Roses are so resilient. This one looks lovely. So this garden bed is currently filled with a lot of roses. I think I have 16 in total, and I also have some bearded iris planted in there, which thankfully have survived the flooding. So this here is my Freesia rose, which I'm looking forward to getting into the ground, and also my Ebb Tide rose. So I'm looking forward to getting both of those in the ground, so I'll get those planted up now. Okay, so I've potted up my Ebb Tide, I've potted up my Freesia rose. Both of those are actually soaked in sea salt prior to planting. You might have noticed they were a bit wet when I planted them, so I soaked them in sea salt. That just kind of helps to reduce the transplant shock. I have had a little bit of a change of plans. It's actually gotten quite a bit warmer. I'm not sure what the temperature is, but the sun's got quite a bit of bite in it. So I will do the lime sulfur a little bit later this evening, once the heat's gone out of the sun, because I don't want to burn any of those leaves, the fresh new leaves that have just come through. And that lime sulfur will actually help with that white scale that I was showing you, some of the diseased stems. With that white scale, it will actually help that white scale and kill it. So it's a really good all-rounder to try and control pests and disease on your roses. Okay, so let's go ahead with the pruning now. So clearly with the roses that I've just planted, I actually won't need to do any pruning. And this one here has actually only been planted about a month ago, as well as this one. However, now we're getting down to some of the others that haven't actually been checked. The one just over here, that one actually is one that I've actually just planted as well. So it's a brand new rose and it won't need any pruning, but all the others need to be just checked. So when I'm checking, I'm just checking for anything that looks like it's dead. I'm not too worried about a little bit of black spot here, because that will be actually controlled with that lime sulfur. But this one at the back here, so you can see this one at the back just here, it's got some brown stems which need to come off. Okay, so with this rose here, I've just spotted that it actually needs some pruning. So you can see just here, it's got a lot of dead. That's just a little bit of dead there. But if you look closely, try and get it in the light, you can see there's a new bud just forming there. So all I'm going to do is just snip off just above that. And same with this one here. It's got a new shoot just coming up. Just take it off just above. So I've just cut off any little spent roses as well. They come off as well. And if you can see just down here, This one's actually got one that's coming up here. Now, what you don't want is when roses rub together, they actually they can be quite abrasive, and that's where disease will get in. So I need to just cut that whole thing off itself. This here will be perfectly fine, but I'm going to cut it just there because I don't want anything coming across and rubbing against this branch. So I'm just going to continue now going through, just cutting off the dead heads, cutting off anything that looks like it might be dead, like that stick is dead. And this one here, as hard as it is, I'm going to do a little bit extra pruning here as well. So that nothing crosses or touches. Okay, so I'm just going to continue making my way down the garden and pruning those roses back. There's two schools of thought on how to actually cut the roses, whether you go directly straight across the stem or whether you do it on an angle. Some say straight across the stem is fantastic, and others say that an angle is fantastic. One creates more surface area. They both allow disease to get in, so I'm hoping that the lime sulfur saves me, and I just basically use whatever I think is applicable when it comes to each individual rose plant. Some are angled and some are dead straight. Okay, so I have planted, I have pruned, I haven't sprayed. As I said, I'll do that a little bit later. It's just a bit too hot in the sun at the moment, so I'll show you it when I do it. Okay, so it's a little bit later in the afternoon now. It's around about 3:30 in the afternoon, which is, the sun's not as hot as what it was. So I feel confident spraying my foliage. I just didn't want to burn anything. So I'm just about to mix up the lime sulfur, and I thought I would show you how I do it. So this is my sprayer that I've got. It's a battery operated sprayer, which is fantastic. I've just already put in there a litre of water. And this is the product that I used. Yates lime sulfur. It's the one that I've always used. As you can see, it's a little bit well worn, and boy does it smell. So I've got 20 mils of lime sulfur here, and I'm just going to put it in here. You can use 10 mils, however, because I do know that I have obviously a scale outbreak by those that white scale that we had on that rose, I want to make sure that I treat it well. So I'm mixing it strong at 20 mils per litre. Okay, so that's all mixed up now, so let's start spraying. And boy does it smell. Did I mention that before? It really, really smells. So when I am spraying, I want to make sure that I get all the leaves. I want the leaves to be dripping wet. So I make sure I need to get all the stems of the roses and all the leaves. So I've all finished now. We've planted the roses, we've pruned the roses, and we've sprayed the roses. Normally there's just a fourth step. This is just a once a year thing that I usually do, but the fourth step is usually I would put some black marble around all of my rose plants. It's a great fertilizer. It's the only one that I use for my roses. However, I am currently out of it at the moment. So I will make sure that I do that within the next week or so, because they will need a good feed. I just love having roses in the garden. I tend to not buy them when they're bare root because I don't have as much success planting them. I think it's just a user thing. I'm not very good at that. So I tend to buy them in pots more than I buy them bare root because it just hasn't worked out for me in the past. But I love having roses that have a significance or a special memory attached, like I was explaining before about the Freesia and the Ebb Tide. We have quite a few of our roses actually have different meanings, or they might be for different people, and it's just lovely to have that in the garden. I think it just adds that personal touch. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.